So I'm now ready to bring in my second light. This is going to be my fill light. And I'm using a small softbox here. This is a 60 by 60 Broncolor softbox, and I've got it on a floor stand, so it's right down low, right on the ground, and I want it directly in front of our model here. Remember with this first key light, our beauty dish, we had that straight on, so we don't want any shadows to one side, so I don't want this fill light to be off to one side either. I don't want to create any shadows coming across the model. I want it straight underneath as well. Okay. You can use a reflector as well. I know lots of people do that, but I prefer just the added control of an additional strobe, because no matter how good a reflector is, it's never going to bounce back as much light or anything like that. So this is going to give me a lot more control. So that's what I'm going to go for here. And it's worth mentioning the angle that I'm actually pointing this at. Lots of people think, you know, put that fill light down and they just angle it straight up at the model's face, directly up at the model's face. But I'm going to angle it a little bit further down than that, because I actually want it pointing directly in here, because I want to try and capture some of this softer light that's around the edge of this softbox. Every modifier has a slightly brighter center or a hot spot, and towards the outside of that modifier is going to be a little bit of a softer light, and I want that softer light to be on the face. If I point it straight at her, we're going to be getting that slightly harsher glow. So I'm just going to angle it at the torso, and let's take a shot of that, see what that's looking like. Okay, just put these on so we can see what's going on. Okay. Everything firing, let's have a look. So, I mentioned that this second light is going to be an objective light, so we can have it, you know, whatever power that we feel looks good, but we don't want that to contradict the rule that we said about lighting from below. And this is way too bright. At the moment, we can see we've got a lot of light underneath the nose, so that actually, you know, the bottom of the nose is brighter than the top of the nose. We said about when we had our light from above, we want the shadows underneath. This is way too powerful now, okay? And it's quite flat. We can almost not even see Smiler's jaw, you know, jaw at all. It's just almost blending straight into the neck, okay? So we need to turn that way down. So for reference, it's actually at the same power as this one. Okay, so let's see what that looks like now. Okay, that's nice. That's good. So if we just quickly snap back to the first shot we took without that fill light, okay, we can see how dark the shadow is underneath the jawline. Okay, and we can see that once we bring in that fill light, we've added a lot of light underneath there. I still think that that might actually be a bit too bright. I'm just going to bring it down even more, maybe half a stop on there. Okay, let's take another shot. See what that's looking like. Okay, that's good, that's better. Perfect, okay. So we've got a lot more detail underneath the jawline than we had before. If we just skip back to that first shot, and you'll see what I mean. Really deep, dark shadows, okay? So not much detail there at all, and now we've got a lot more detail back underneath the jawline. So looking at that shot, some people may say, maybe that's, you know, a bit too much light still underneath, you know, oh, Jake, I like maybe a little bit less light underneath the jawline. I like to see a bit more contrast, and I agree with you. You know, definitely it can be nice to have that contrast, but for me, when I'm setting up my lights, remember, I'm thinking about the end goal in mind. I'm thinking about the end shot, the final product, and I know that I'm going to do some post-pro on all of my shots. They all go through that process. I also know that I'm going to be adding a lot of contrast back into these shots later on. Now, if we don't have much light underneath the jaw there, we have a lot of shadow and that sort of thing, and we start adding contrast, then that's going to quite quickly drop off into black. And we know that when it drops off, when shadow drops off into those, you know, deep dark blacks, then you lose the detail. So you can't add as much contrast. If we add more light in there now, I know that I can add quite a lot of contrast later on, and I'll still have as much detail as I possibly can. So with these two lights, again, we have a usable shot. We see this type of lighting all the time. This is very saleable, perfect lighting like this with our key light up above, our beauty dish, creating that nice sculpting light underneath, symmetrical lighting, and then we're just filling it in with our softbox from below, just giving us a bit more detail in the shadows. I think we're ready to now bring in our next set of lights, which is going to be our hair lights.